to the Personal Injury Law Show. This show talks about everything current law of personal injuries and obviously of importance to you, the viewer. My name's Tony Carbone. I'm a lawyer of 30 years experience. With me today I've got John Carrance, a partner in a law firm in workers' compensation. Good evening, John.
Hi, Tony. Hi, viewers.
And Jessica Rosla, a lawyer in insurance law in a law firm. Good evening, Jess.
Evening, Tony. Evening, viewers.
Tonight, viewers, have got a very special episode. We're going to do the first of a family law episode, so please stay tuned for that.
However, Tony, before we get to that, what's in the news?
There's been a lot of stories, as you could imagine, but the first one I want to talk about is detention by the state creates an unavoidable duty of care on the taxpayer. What is this one, John?
Tony, we've got a situation, as we know, the illegal immigrants coming into Australia. The laws have been changed by the Abbott, now Turnbull government, as in these refugees will be put in detention in Nauru. Yep. The problem is the way they are treated. Okay. And we've got current situation of the young Somali girl, 23-year-old, by the name of Abian, who alleges she was raped by at the Nauru detention centre. She's flown to Australia. Apparently she changes her mind. She doesn't want to have an abortion. There's a lot of confusion, and Greg Barnes, rightly in his article, who's a member of the Australian Lawyers Alliance, says the treatment of not only Abian but these type of refugees is abhorrent and against all principles of human rights, Tony.
Jess, the fact that we're taking them in, even though we're shipping them off to Nauru and other places, it creates a duty of care, doesn't it?
That's right, Tony. Particularly in circumstances where the patient's being flown to Australia for treatment and the medical evidence is that they're not fit to return to Nauru, and then that decision is made. That goes beyond breaching a duty of care.
John, Greg Barnes has been a big advocate of these immigrants. He's saying they're human beings just like everyone else.
Exactly.
And quite frankly, if they're mistreated, they're entitled to sue.
They're entitled to sue the Commonwealth, as we know, Tony, and the operator of the institution.
Yes. Look, I think we should get Greg Barnes on board with this because it's a very interesting topic. We'll bring him in the future.
Exactly.
Insurance screench. Now, isn't this a sad story, Jess?
It is, Tony.
This poor child's been given, 6-year-old's been given a chance to go over to Disneyland by the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Can't travel because no one will give him insurance.
Yeah, it is really sad, Tony. This poor Chase Charles, like you said, 6 years old, suffers from a rare genetic condition where he suffers from a number of seizures per day. And his family wanted to obviously give him every kid's dream, which is take him to Disneyland and enjoy that experience. And unfortunately, the family have been, I guess, reluctant or can't go because they can't get the relevant insurance cover.
We find time and time again, don't we, Tony, that these insurance companies they want apparently pristine people with no prior problems, which is not reality, is it, Tony?
It's a sad state of affairs. Let's hope they, sort it out somehow.
Or one insurance company comes to the rescue.
Yeah, why don't they do it as a,
and it'd be great.
Pro bono.
Exactly, it'd be great advertising.
Yeah, I think so. Execs, drug battles. John, companies are paying up to $40,000 a week to send senior executives to rehab facilities treat drug problems.
Tony, in this day and age, high-powered executives in high-powered jobs for large multinational and national companies, there's a byproduct of the workload, the stress and anxiety.
Is that what it is? Not just bad habits?
I mean, there's no excuse in the end, Tony, but in the end, I think the employers recognising that they've got a duty of care, that sure, the work may be causing this stress and anxiety, which causes these high-powered executives to do the wrong thing. Now, luckily, some employers are doing the right thing and sending their executives to these rehabilitation facilities for treatment.
Jess, I don't know, in days gone by, if they caught you with alcohol in your system or drugs, you got the sack.
Yeah.
Are we being too lenient, or is this the way to go?
It's interesting, Tony. I think one of the driving factors is that the employers recognising that these high-powered executives are high fee earners and bring in a lot of revenue for the company. And then they've noticed a decline and they're wanting to rehabilitate them to bring in that benefit again.
And I guess in the end, Tony, we're talking about not a legal problem, a medical problem.
Well, it seems to be widespread by the looks of things. I've got to be careful what I say, but for them to be doing this and spending up to 40 grand a week, Just shows you how important it is. They're protecting their assets, aren't they?
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. This one here is an interesting one. A biker who's got a helmet with a camera at the front.
A GoPro camera.
Now, he's been fined because the helmet doesn't comply with safety regulations, albeit that in a couple of states in Australia, it's not an issue.
In Queensland and South Australia, it is legal to have a GoPro camera on your helmet.
Yep.
It's within the regulations, but for some reason, Tony, within Victoria, it isn't.
I find it extraordinary. Jess, wouldn't you be encouraging people to carry cameras on their helmets and in cars and everything, because it sort of protects as well as gives you something in case of an accident?
Yeah, that's certainly an added protection. I mean, aside from just, I guess, the leisurely aspect of it, of wanting to capture what you're...
It captures what the incident will has occurred, but there's a bit of a problem, Tony.
What's that?
Michael Schumacher had a GoPro camera on his helmet. Look what
when he had the ski accident?
Look what happened to him.
Are you serious?
Yes. And the allegation is, Tony, that the camera changes the dynamics of the helmet, and it changes what protection is afforded to the skull.
Geez, that's interesting.
Yeah.
We'll see if we can get someone on the show that produces those cameras in the future.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, it's actually the question about whether it should be allowed is on appeal, Tony, so maybe we'll do another episode when a decision's handed down.
Sure.
Exactly.
Hey, John, this is up your alley. There's one of the guys in Goodfellas, right?
Great
In
film.
1968, that massive Lufthansa heist where they stole $6 million, allegedly. Someone's been finally charged with it after all these years.
Vincent Asaro, he looks like he's in his 80s, Tony.
He is, he's 80s.
And he's a dangerous criminal. And there's a photo of the FBI carrying him away.
What evidence could they have after all these years? I mean, most of the people that were involved in this are allegedly dead.
Well, yeah, our old friend Jimmy the Gent, Tony.
Yeah, Jim, that's played by Robert De Niro, by the way, Jess, if you don't know him.
But apparently the evidence is there. The 1978 heist, which is now worth about 20 or 30 million bucks.
Yeah, according to this, it would have been worth 28 million today. So it's a lot of money. Very interesting after all these years.
Exactly.
And just quickly, Blitz on Violence. Jess, tell us about it.
What's occurred is that the independent Minister, Cathy McGowan, has tried to pass a private member's bill, Tony, in Parliament to protect people who are victims of domestic violence and in circumstances where they may be cross-examined by their perpetrator.
By the perpetrator.
Yeah. So it seems like there's been a bit of a gap in the system and she's trying to, I guess, cover that gap and make sure that there's protection afforded to these victims.
John, it's bizarre that the person that's allegedly causing you grief is cross-examining you on allegations of harassment, domestic abuse, and all this sort of stuff.
Again, that could be a form of violence against the victim in a courtroom. Tony.
Yeah.
Shocking.
She's got to be commended for this, I think.
Yeah,
it's pretty
definitely.
important.
I think it picks up on the massive power imbalance in that circumstance and just perpetuates it. So it definitely needs to be addressed.
John, thanks for coming on board. After the break, viewers, we've got Stephen Edwards, an expert in family law, so stay tuned. Viewers, welcome back to the show. As I said before the break, tonight we're going to do the first episode in family law. So it's a big one, Jess.
Yeah, definitely.
And we're very fortunate to have Stephen Edward. He's an accredited family law specialist. Good evening, Stephen.
Good evening, Tony.
Now, Stephen, on this issue of family law, tell us what it generally encompasses.
Well, family law encompasses divorce, property settlement and arrangements for children. That's the simple coverage of the big area.
Yep. And Jess, I'm going to start off firstly with divorce. I want to keep it nice and simple. What does this entail? What happens there?
So effectively, Tony, in order to get a divorce in Victoria, or correct me if I'm wrong, Australia, can I say?
Yes,
or in
it's
Australia.
A national system.
You don't need to prove fault on either party in order to pass for a divorce. And I'll pass over to Stephen to explain the process and what's involved.
Well, if you want to get a divorce, and I've got to say, some people come to us and say, I want to get a divorce, where really what they're talking about is a property settlement, you know, the end piece of dividing things up. But a divorce is an order of a court that you're not married. anymore. The marriage has ended. You're no longer husband or wife. To do that, you've got to be separated and living. You've got to be separated for a minimum of 12 months.
Yes.
But you can actually be under the one roof for part or even all of that. There's got to be an irretrievable breakdown of the marriage for 12 months.
Okay. So you get your divorce and 30 days later you get a decree nisi absolute, which means the marriage is over.
Well, that's the old Latin, isn't it? Because
okay.
well, because
I do like the Latin.
Well, the nisi, because I learned it at school, which is weird, but nisi means unless, and so they've changed the wording.
Okay.
But in the olden days, it was, I suppose, you have when you're at court before the divorce comes into effect, the court would say you will be divorced nisi, which means unless.
Yes.
Okay,
so 30 days, if there was any reasons why it shouldn't go through.
Well, sometimes people get together.
Okay.
You know, and then after that, at the end of the 30 days, that decree nisi became absolute and took effect.
Yes.
Now they say you get a decree that will come into effect in 30 days. So they scrubbed the Latin, but the same idea.
Yeah, I do like the Latin, but anyway.
What happens if one party wants a divorce and the other doesn't?
There's no choice.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Absolutely
There's
right.
no choice. Yeah. It's irretrievable breakdown of a marriage. There's no fault involved.
Yep.
Just, they don't want you, they don't want you.
Yep.
Simple as that. No, sorry, I don't mean to be so harsh about it, but that's how it is in this world. It's probably the best thing too, because I do remember, Steve, when before it became a no-fault system, it was an absolute circus, wasn't it?
Well, it was before 1975. At Slater and Gordon, we started doing family law work back in 1971, which was under the old Matrimonial Causes Act, and that was, you had to prove...
You had to prove fault.
Yeah, you had to prove fault. Desertion
or investigators flying around
Absolutely.
the place, taking videos of people doing the wrong thing.
Would have kept
so it
them
was
in
a
business,
real circus. Yeah. All right, let's keep moving. Jess, a property settlement. It's pretty simple terminology. What are we talking about here? Division of assets?
Pretty much, Tony. So things such as houses that the couple would own together, or liabilities, which is assets that you owe money on effectively, and how that's divided. And I guess a more important one that's often forgotten about is superannuation, which is also considered an asset. And
there's a lot of disputes over furniture as well, isn't there, Steve?
There are. And sometimes people will be able to sort out the big issues, who gets the house or whatever, and very often you get a heated debate over some of the smaller items. You know, I've had people fighting over the pet dog.
That's important.
They're often big fights, and some people actually say, can I get visitation rights to my pet, which actually can't. But some of the really heated disputes are over, they'll come along and ask you about it. All the court can do with a pet is say, who gets the animal? But people can fight over family photos. The advice that we give at Slater and Gordon is, if you're going to leave, try to get copies of photos, because sometimes they're very hard to retrieve.
And there's spiteful people that burn them and destroy them and things like that. With the family home, Jess, you think it's pretty straightforward, but there's issues of you might have come into the marriage with the home. And the parties are together. What happens there?
Well, it's, I guess, a case-by-case basis, Tony. So the court will look at a number of factors, including contributions, and that may not necessarily be monetary contributions to the home.
Homemaker. Yeah. And also things you look at are length that people are together. That's pretty important, Steve. The length of time you're together. What is a long marriage these days?
I'd say anything more than 10 years, 10 to 15 years.
I always thought it was 7 years and up. Is it going up again?
Well, look, if you're around, for certain, if you're 10 years, it depends on the circumstances, because people can obviously live together before they get married, and so you've got to glue the whole time period together.
One of the things people ask me on a regular basis is boyfriend-girlfriend situations, for want of a better word. Is there entitlement to an asset if you're together long enough?
There's this myth, we're often told, oh, well, if we live together for 2 years, then there's an automatic 50-50. But it's not that. It's what Jessica says. It's the main area that you look at is contribution. So there's no automatic entitlement, but what you've got to look at is where did money come from to buy something? What did people have at the start? And try to come up with an outcome that's fair based on that, and how each side face the future. But you often get a big question, did the two people live together? And that's... One side will often say, yes, we did. One will say, no, we won't. So question of fact.
But there's also a lot of situations just where they might have their own properties. One might be renting. One might have a property that's got a mortgage to it. And they live, they share times together. And that could be living together. Now, the thing you've got to bear in mind is this. if there's a breakup, you want to know what contributions you've made, so you've got to keep some sort of records, and it's important you get legal advice, don't you?
Yeah, definitely, Tony. And I guess it's a fine balance, because you don't want to be recording that in light and I guess preempting that you might end up at a final point where the relationship breaks down. So it's a tricky thing that you don't think about till it occurs, I guess.
Stephen, because it's a minefield, the Family Law Act is a minefield in a lot of respects.
It is.
People should get advice reasonably early if they suspect that there's something not quite right with their relationship. Do you agree with that concept?
I do agree with that concept, and a lot of people will come along and say, what happens if? And you know that they're thinking through it. The advice that we'll give at Slater and Gordon is always, if it happens, what you've got to try to do is achieve a nice, fair settlement. A fair settlement as efficiently and speedily as you can. And if you're going to leave, try to make sure that you've got copies of all relevant financial documents, which goes back to what Jessica was talking about.
Yeah.
And Jess, what's really important is this. You might be earning $1,000 a week and your partner might be earning $5,000 a week.
Yeah.
For family law purposes, it probably doesn't matter if you're making contributions as a homemaker, etc., etc.
I suppose it only matters in the sense that if you've been together for a while, the court will look at your financial situation, particularly where there might be kids involved, I guess. But another thing I was going to ask, Steve, is there a time limit by which a property settlement needs to take place after a divorce?
You've normally got 12 months from the date of the divorce to either issue proceedings or come up with an agreement. That can be a flexible point of time if you're outside of that time and you've got a reason to explain your delay, and the court might allow you to start proceedings.
Viewers, welcome back to the show. We're very fortunate tonight to have Stephen Edward, an accredited specialist in family law.
Great to be here, Tony.
We're talking about the minefield, which is the Family Law Act 1975, as amended. Now, Steve, before the break, we're talking about superannuation. That is a really big topic, isn't it? Because these policies can be worth a lot of money.
Well, it is these days. It's one of the largest assets that a couple have at the end of a marriage. Absolutely. And it's the area where there really are simple solutions. A lot of people believe that there aren't, but you can actually talk it through and come up with an agreement.
And there's formulas, isn't
Absolutely.
there? If you can't reach agreement, just there's a formula, and a court or by agreement, you can resolve these issues.
Yeah, I think it's a really important topic, Steve and Tony, in circumstances where mum will stay home and look after the kids and obviously not working, so no contributions are going into superannuation, marriage breaks down, and then what happens?
Steve, one of the things that concerns me a lot is, over the years, a lot of people have rung me and said, oh look, my wife and I have agreed on a settlement, and they leave it at that.
Yeah.
That is deadly, isn't it?
It is deadly.
Tell us a bit what
the dangerous point of that, particularly if you've got a fair amount of superannuation, and this is where we typically see it.
Yes.
Slater and Gordon people are saying, well, we don't need your help to finalise this.
Yeah.
We just want to know. We'll get your advice on how we've worked it out, and then you go away and don't lock it down as a legally binding agreement.
Can I stop you there? What's a legally binding agreement?
A legally binding agreement is either what are called consent orders that are made by the family court, which is a common way, or you can have what's called a binding financial agreement that's signed off by two lawyers.
And stamped by the court.
Well, the binding financial agreement isn't stamped by the court, but you've got to have independent legal advice from separate lawyers.
And the consent orders are stamped by the court?
Stamped by the court.
Okay.
But the consent orders have to be fair in the court's eyes, but a financial agreement just has to be what two parties agree on.
Yes.
But if you don't have either of those, you can have somebody coming back years down the track.
15, 20 years later.
Absolutely, to claim a slice of your superannuation. So it's imperative that you get that locked down as a legally binding agreement.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Jess, one of the big concerns for people out in the community is the cost of seeing a lawyer.
Yeah.
Stephen's team can make it pretty simple in terms of getting advice. Tell us a bit more about what they can and can't do.
as Stephen will tell us in some more detail, they can offer fixed fees, which is quite attractive for couples in circumstances where there's a lot going on and you don't want to think about any additional fees whilst you're trying to divide your assets, and also deferral of payment in circumstances where you don't have cash flow but equity in a property.
Steve, you agree with what Jess just said?
Absolutely. I think what concerns a lot of people is what are the legal costs going to be involved in having an agreement. And since 2011, Slater and Gordon have had a fixed fee arrangement where we give a fixed fee quote, so people know up front what the fees are going to be. And I'm sometimes asked, well, what is there in addition to the quote? And we say, no, the quote's the quote.
Yes.
And I've got to say, on average, the sort of fees that people pay to have an agreement organised and finalised, it's not substantial in most cases.
Now, the thing is, a lot of people, they wait until the proverbial hits the fan, Jess, before they get advice.
Yeah.
It's a bad way to do business, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, prevention's better than cure, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Tony. And certainly, I guess, involving a lawyer a little earlier may help with any power imbalance that exists in the relationship, and you feel like you have someone acting for you and fighting for you. So it's a good way to, I guess, keep a bit of neutrality in the situation.
Exactly. This power imbalance we're talking about, Steve, it can also be in terms of earning capacity and potential. So let's say you've got a situation where someone's earning $5,000 a week and one's earning $1,000 a week. The court will still want to equalise that in a settlement. Is that correct?
Well, it's all taken into account, absolutely, and it's the idea of looking at what is fair, or what the law says is just and equitable, which is what's fair, based on looking backwards, and I call that sort of a rear vision thing, how you've each shared the driving to get up to where you are, but also looking forward to the future, how you each stand facing the future. And what is sometimes forgotten is that one person will have a substantial earning capacity, but in reality, that's one of the major assets that flows out of the marriage. So you've got to strike a fair balance, taking that into account. Absolutely.
And Jess, without putting myself in diabolical strife, if anything ever happened to myself, my wife's looked after the family in the last 28 years. It's given me the opportunity to get out there and actually do what I do. So where Stephen's coming from is the fact that she's done everything else, and I've been a lawyer, has given me the opportunity to reach my potential in terms of earnings. Do you agree with that?
So that's an argument that could be raised, Steve, that because you've been at home and looked after the kids, and then the partner's been able to go off and study and achieve those dreams, that's something a court may consider. Absolutely,
and there's this idea of partnership, I suppose, or a marriage and a de facto relationship, which is classed as the same way as a marriage. It's looked at as a partnership between two people who are contributing in their respective spheres.
Yes. So you've got the homemaker that's keeping the family nice and tight together, and you've got the one that can go out there and earn the money. Now, if you had to do everything, you can't be a jack of all trades, correct?
That's absolutely right. No, it's not going to work.
Jess, one area I want to touch on, but I really don't want to go too much detail, is custody and access. You know, these are issues that arise all the time. And you do need advice on that as well. But sometimes people use them as leverage for property settlements, which I don't particularly like.
It's difficult, Tony. I guess going through that situation, there is a lot of emotions being thrown around, and as you said, that can be used against the partner. But certainly in that situation, you would want to seek advice about what your entitlements are and what potential order of a court could make. And certainly it's not an area where I guess the partners would see eye to eye.
No. Steve, back on the financial side of the marriage, there's things like shares, paintings, all sorts of things, cars. So it's pretty important to get advice from a lawyer that knows what they're talking about. At Slater and Gordon, you run a pretty sophisticated team in family law. How would they get in touch with you?
If you want to get advice, and it's good to get advice early, call Slater and Gordon 1800 555 777.
And Steve, it's absolutely critical because it's a moving feast, isn't it? This business of family law, things do change overnight, don't they?
Absolutely, absolutely.
All of a sudden, someone's got a promotion, they're picking up an extra $100,000 a year, or they've come into an inheritance, which could kick in as well.
Well, they're the things that you do need to get specialised legal advice about, because there are a lot of myths in family law, and what we find at Slater and Gordon really that we're explaining to people It's not what you think. We've got to give you clear advice on how those things that you mentioned, Tony, are factored in, and they all factored in.
Yes.
Sometimes people just ignore them, and then you wind up with a bad deal.
And Jess, one of the things people can do these days too is get binding financial agreements before they enter into a marriage or relationship.
Yep, that's right.
And that's something we'll touch on in the future.
Yep.
Jess, thanks for coming on board. We're at the end of the
Thanks for
show,
having me.
viewers. Stephen, pleasure to get you on board.
Great to be here, Tony. Love to come back.
Viewers, thanks for watching the show. Stay tuned for future episodes. Go to YouTube for our past episodes. Go to our social media platforms. And always remember to stay safe.